Good evening and welcome. It is time once again for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I'm here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. Yep, it is. Views expressed are those of the speakers and are not intended to represent WRFU, UCIMC, Urbana Socialist Forum, or as we like to say on the TV version of the show, UPTV. These views are our own, and by our, in this instance, if not in any other, I would like to introduce or have, God, I've totally messed that up. It's so stupid. Let's see, how did I say? In this instance, okay, anyway. I would like for my charming guest to introduce herself right now.
Pretty much just going to say my name, María
Okay.
Jimenez, because I don't really have an affiliation. I feel kind of weird about that, but...
Is that weird? Do you want to belong to something?
I mean, yes and no. Like, it'd be...
Yes and no.
There's things I want to belong to, but it's like, I don't know if I'm in the place in my life to really, like, pick one, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
you're looking around for things
looking
to,
around,
like,
yeah.
where can I lend my talents to?
CU Immigration is definitely one that's, like, big, though, right now.
I think that's good.
For sure.
Of course, you're on the show, so you kind of
Yeah,
have
so
to say that. Yeah. You can't go.
I do mean that, though. I'm not just saying that.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I'll take that as written. I also have to check. Wow, we're very loud. Hold on. Do testing 1 2. Yeah. It's weird. We have all these different controls, and I have to run them
Got your
and
whole sound thing going on.
try and have a. So we do have a mystery guest here as well, who may be
Joining us
dragged
later.
into talking if we say something that
She's a
inspires
passionate
her.
speaker, so we might
So,
be able to get her to crack her show.
there is a microphone there and a chair, and you can, feel free to leap into the conversation if
when
you
the
are so
conversation
inclined.
gets you heated,
Yeah.
go ahead, join in.
Well, we may say some controversial things that you don't agree with. So.
I'll most likely agree, I have a feeling.
Okay, that's good.
She's hanging out with me. She's
Yeah, yeah.
got to have some level of.
That's right. Yeah. So, am I right in assuming that this is your second interview of the day?
Second interview of the day. No.
No.
There.
Someone was telling me.
Yeah,
A
so-
relative of yours was mentioning something.
Yeah, he did mention that he came into contact with some people from NPR,
Uh-huh.
and that they were interested in kind of doing something in regards to Urbana becoming a sanctuary city.
Uh-huh.
And they wanted to have someone to represent the community, and him and someone else talked, and they decided that I'd be a good person for that. So I was really excited to hear that last night. I was pretty happy when I got that news, so I'm excited about that. It isn't my second of the day, though. This was my first one.
Oh, okay. So you're fresh. for
I'm
this
fresh,
one.
yeah.
You're not all worn out.
Totally.
Like
It's actually my first time ever doing anything like this.
Really?
Yeah, I was kind of freaking out on the way over here.
Oh, well, does it matter to you that you're speaking to the world? Because we stream online, so...
It doesn't matter to me, but it definitely it makes you think a little bit more about
Mm-hmm.
everything, you know.
I know. Yeah, it does. And it's weird. When you listen to people talking on the radio, a lot of the time you think to yourself, they just sound so awkward. and
Awkward,
weird.
yeah.
But then when you have that microphone in front of
Yeah.
you and you're thinking, gosh, there are a lot of people listening to me, you start to think, well, maybe I better not just like blah, 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 but I have to be a little more,
Thing though is like
coherent
it's kind of like it's my thing, even though I've never done it before. It's something I've always been interested in, so it's something I've always seen myself eventually becoming a part of, and that's kind of why I was nervous, because I was like, this is like the beginning of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is different knowing that a lot of people are, because usually you're having a conversation one-on-one with someone, and you
Yeah.
can kind of feel whether or not that person is on the same page as you, or if they're agreeing with you or disagreeing with you, and not being able to see the faces of all these people that are hearing you is like, do they just think I'm an idiot, or do they agree with me? So yeah.
I'm pretty sure that they're all like totally on your side.
Right,
They're like,
right.
yes, that
That's-
was a great answer.
See,
Yeah,
that's something that feels really good, though.
yeah. Oh,
Just to know that
Yeah.
the people that are listening care, so
Uh-huh.
they're probably on your side.
Yeah, well, that's true. This is not. I don't think this is a station that a lot of people just sort of randomly tune into. There may be the odd driver who's going, well,
Oh, what is this?
well, these people are talking. What are they talking about? But mostly it's people who know that there's a show.
Right.
And who are going, okay, I've heard this before, and there's some interesting stuff on
Mm-hmm.
here, so I will tune in again.
Well, I feel like I should have heard of it before, though.
You should have.
I should have, yeah.
I
feel
don't-
feel a little weird about that.
Advertise it, really.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
I'm not good at self-promotion.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are really good at that, and they make it seem so natural that you go, oh, well, that's
They're
pretty
not
cool.
even bragging. They're just
Yeah.
telling you
But
stuff.
me, I feel like, well, I want to be humble. You could listen if you felt like it, or you're in the mood, or anything else. You know.
An audience that way.
Well, I mean, I think because it's something that is, in a sense, advocating or
Mm-hmm.
providing information about things that matter to people's everyday lives that are experiencing things like this, it is something that you can kind of promote without it being about you. It's more about the community. It's CU immigration. So
That's true.
that's the way I see it.
Well, there used to be 2 shows. I don't know if you
Yeah.
knew that. Ricardo
No.
had a TV show.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You did mention that.
And
yeah.
then I had the radio show, and at some point we were both like, this is exhausting. We both can't keep doing this because
Yeah.
we're fighting for the same people to come talk, and we're talking about the same things. And so I said, all right, I'll just do both. And I'll just bring a camera in and set it up
Yeah.
and record it. It's going to be
It's
very
essentially
low
the
tech.
same thing.
Well, it was a lot nicer looking. He had a camera operator, and he had a little set. I mean, he was very professional. about
Yeah.
it. It was
Yeah.
nice
I
lighting.
spoke
and
to him
stuff.
on the phone last night, actually.
Mm,
Yeah.
mhm. But now it's really like just point a camera and like start talking and
But
see
it's,
where we end up.
I don't know. I like the feel of it. I definitely
Yeah.
feel comfortable.
So you see yourself in show business someday?
I wouldn't say show business,
The media.
but I
Media.
think I care a lot about a few, like not a few things, but a lot of things. And
Mhm.
there are things that I don't have any trouble talking about
Yeah.
or being open about. And I think, like today, for example, I was like, wow, like I wish I would have done more like research or something so that I would have come in with all these like statistics and stuff. But like at the same time, that's not as important as someone who has genuine passion
Yeah.
for something that they care about. And that's something that I could see myself doing, is being on shows like this or things like that, talking about the things that I think some people might not have a voice for.
So since the topic of this show is ostensibly immigration,
Right.
is a topic that you care about?
I mean, of course, it's something that I live with every single day. It's like probably the biggest factor in who I am, even though it was difficult to admit that early on, you know,
Mhm.
because it's kind of like you don't want to like go up to someone and be like, I'm an immigrant and all this
Uh-huh.
stuff. But I mean, with everything that's been going on lately, it's something that has felt more and more like I need to make this known and I need to talk about it
Mhm.
because I didn't talk about it for a long time.
I think the media, I really dislike using that term because it implies a lot,
of things, yes.
But generally speaking, media is guilty of opting for easy stereotypes.
Right.
And so with immigrants, the stereotype is always someone that has broken English,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
And I
Go
can clearly say one of the reasons growing up that I tried so hard to appear as like mature and intelligent and that I knew my words and that I knew what I was talking about is to defy that stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that I wouldn't speak Spanish at school was to defy that stereotype. The reason that I feel so passionate about like English and that English classes were my favorite when I was in high school was because I wanted English teachers to be like, wow, that's so impressive that you were an immigrant and you were in ESL and now you're in these advanced classes. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't until very recently that I realized that I wanted to appear as smart because I wanted to appear as not that stereotypical immigrant.
Right.
But in the process of doing that, I strayed away from the immigrant part,
Mm-hmm.
which now I'm trying to put together as one.
And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably weren't even aware of the stereotype as a stereotype.
Yeah.
It was just something you, like, I don't want to be like that.
I don't want to be like
whatever
this
that
image.
is.
But I didn't even know what that image was. I just didn't want to be.
Yeah.
I mean, especially being undocumented for so long, that was really hard because I didn't just avoid the conversation. I would go out of my way to make the person believe that I was not undocumented.
Right.
And this was something I was doing as a 13-year-old kid. I just knew that when I went home, it was something that I couldn't avoid, and that in public, I could make it my own way. And that's pretty sad, honestly, when you really think about it. But it's
important to recognize how these things go to forming our identity. I mean,
for sure.
Identity is such a plastic thing. You know, it's always changing, and as
Which
the academics
I
say.
struggle with that a lot. I struggle with that because every time I feel like I'm coming closer and closer to this is who I am, it's like something happens and all of a sudden it's like, wait, no, you have no idea again.
Yeah, I don't think you ever become.
Truly.
You're just always becoming.
Right.
You're always in the process of becoming yourself.
But I feel like a lot of the things that we do as individuals, and they're probably things that are like implemented us through society, is reaching that goal of who you are instead of like who you can become. And you know, you there's this idea of growing, but what people don't tell you is that you never stop growing and that it keeps happening.
Right.
That, I mean, even like my parents, I see them change and grow and all the time. It never truly just stops. And that's something I've had to realize that, you know, because you look back like 2 years ago and you're like, oh my God, who was I 2 years ago? And then I know that like 2 weeks from now I'm going to look back at like something I'm doing right now and be like, what was I doing?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
yeah.
Well, I think the process of becoming who you are, this is my theory about it, is that you're always fighting to the balance between, because who you are is who we think you are,
right,
and who you feel you are. So you're trying to balance that out so it doesn't tip too far the wrong way.
Right. And I think, to me, the way I kind of see it is it's kind of in layers almost. And it's like the force of like who you want people to think you are, the force of who you would like to be, the force of who you were, the force of all the, because everyone that knows you has kind of a different idea of you, and you can kind of manipulate those ideas with people to make them you know, see you different ways. I mean, everyone can clearly admit we open up to different people in different ways, completely at different levels.
Absolutely.
And we have a lot of control over that. And that is confusing too. And I just think there's definitely a lot of layers to it. And it's not just something as simple as like, this is who I am, because it's our emotions, our knowledge, our experiences, and that's constantly changing. So you're constantly changing, and that to some people is motivating, and to other people it's scary. To me, it's both.
Do you suppose that you think about this sort of thing more, or have come to be a person that thinks about this sort of thing more because of your immigrant background, because of that struggle throughout your life?
Definitely. But the thing is that I didn't realize that until kind of recently, honestly. Like I've known, like growing up, that there was something about me that was just a little bit more intense than other people. And I think a lot of that comes from the life that you live at home and then the life that I was living outside of home, because there were two completely different things.
Right.
Language has a lot to do with that. Culture has so much to do with that. And that's one thing that is the balance between American culture and then the Costa Rican culture that I have, and trying to find a balance between those while still making my parents happy, but still, because now I'm at the point where, you know, I feel like, I don't feel like it, I know that if I went back to Costa Rica, I'm not, you know, I'd be a stranger there. And that's kind of something that's really hard to deal with, because to American people, I'm foreign, and I'm this extravagant thing who speaks a different language at home and has all these cool culture things and eats all these interesting foods, but I'm very Americanized. And when my family comes and visits, I see the difference in us, and I see the merge of two cultures. American in comparison to my parents, but in comparison to my friends, I'm Costa Rican. And that's something that's really hard when it comes to your identity.
Yeah. I'm second generation immigrant, so my parents came here, but then I was born here.
Right.
And what you just said reminded me of something. I grew up living in, the wastelands of central Illinois. I was probably, I think, as far as I knew, I mean, there may be more, but as far as I was aware, I was one of like 2 Mexican kids
Wow.
that I had ever seen or heard of.
That's insane.
Up until I was like in my teens or so. And because the weird parent stuff, which I won't go into, I had never met anybody from my extended family.
Mm-hmm.
So when in my early teens, I got a job offering out in California, and I thought, oh man, this is going to be great. I'm going to be in LA.
Yeah.
I'm going to be around my people.
Yeah.
Finally,
Yeah.
I'm going to be in a place where I belong, because I grew up just always feeling
Isolated.
just odd. Like, okay, I don't really fit in. I'm not really,
What am I?
Yeah, exactly. So I went out there, and I remember getting off the plane and, going around and seeing Mexicans and going, oh my God. And there's like nothing.
Nothing.
A whole universe away from me.
Totally. Yeah.
And I felt so like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like, I don't belong anywhere. It was the weirdest feeling. I just don't belong anywhere.
I still feel that way.
Yeah.
I sit in a room of Hispanics sometimes, and I feel a closeness for sure,
Uh-huh.
but I still feel different.
Yeah.
And then, which is confusing to me. I haven't exactly completely been able to figure it out, so I don't know if I should even be talking about it. But there's something that's different. I don't know if it's...
There's a lot that's different.
I definitely feel a lot different than my family.
Mm-hmm.
I think that might just be the way that I think about things. I think maybe I question a lot more than they do.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of just let things, I don't know, be, and I can't do that, and that's something that's always made me different than them. So I don't know if it's an emotional thing or if it's a culture thing or what it is, but I know that something in my identity makes me feel different.
Yeah. Well, culture is basically a set of rules for how you operate. And it's like, this is your operating system, I guess you might call it.
I don't fit into the operating
and
system.
if you don't,
right.
if you have like dual operating systems, that's really weird. Like, well, you use a key command for this, but that won't work on this one. You have to use the mouse for
Right.
that.
And that's the merge
know.
of 2 different cultures that is so confusing.
It's very...
But the thing is, I mean, I love the culture that I see in my parents when it's the way that my mom throws herself into her cooking.
Yeah.
The way that she does it with some kind of like need that I've never seen in anyone else. It makes her truly happy. And Hispanic moms in general, I think they want the way they treat their children. They want to, like, my mom wants to feed me and see me smile when I'm eating and know that the food that I'm eating tastes good. And she just wants all these, I don't know. That's something to me that's really important. Knowing that I have so much family in Costa Rica and just wondering, knowing that I was born in a country such a long time ago that I haven't been to since I was 3 years old.
Oh, wow. 3 years old.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 19 now, so...
So your first... English is your second language.
English is my second language.
But...
I remember not knowing English, and
Right.
I remember knowing English. I don't remember learning English.
Yeah. But the transition... But the bulk of you is American.
Mm-hmm.
Since you were only, even though you picked up a lot from your family and
Right,
whatever,
right.
Just experience-wise, experientially, as they would say, you're this much American, this much Costa Rican. That's...
It's weird to me.
It is weird.
It's really hard to put it into something that makes sense to me, especially to other
It's a
people.
unique chemistry.
Yeah.
And see, that's
And-
the thing.
The thing, though, is, like, with my 3 siblings,
Uh-huh.
we each came at different ages. So we each have 3 different experiences. My brother came when he was in 5th grade.
Oh, okay.
So he had what I would say probably one of the hardest experiences, because he had to learn English, I think, at a stage where you're starting to be embarrassed about everything.
Right.
And that was probably really hard. And he had known, Costa Rica for a long time, so that must have been hard. My younger brother came when he was 3 months old. So the United States is all he knows.
Right.
He doesn't have any concept of Costa Rica. He doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
he knows that it's part of his identity because of our family, but himself, I don't think he truly has. Because I still remember Costa Rica. I can think back to, the house that we lived in and the way that it looked and all these things, but he doesn't have any recollection of that. So we've all had 3 very different experiences in the United States.
And then your parents is yet another level of,
Right.
that was probably a big,
Right.
really big change. And for them, they still carry that whole, over time, a lot of things in the past recede. I mean, they don't disappear.
Right, they're always there.
The building blocks that are in you are always part of your foundation, but
Right.
they get farther away from where you are, and you don't look at them
The
the
way
same
my dad talks about Costa Rica, he remembers every detail.
Mhm.
He remembers, how long he would have to walk from place to place. He says that if you took him back right now, he could tell you exactly how to get from here to here, that he remembers the roads and the places and all these things. And to him, it's still a very, very vivid memory.
Yeah.
And I think he gets confused from time to time between, would I go back or should I stay here? I've seen him go through phases where he's like, yeah, I would definitely go back. We should go back.
Sure.
And other times when he's like, no, I'm not going back. My mom does not want to go back whatsoever.
Really?
She
Okay.
is happy here. She wants to stay here. This is where she wants to live.
Uh-huh.
So they have 2 different views on it themselves. My dad fell in love with the United States on a business trip. When he still lived in Costa Rica, and he was like, I
Yeah.
want to move to the United States. And my mom was like, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And then she moved here, and she loved it. So,
Uh-huh. So you can't really realistically answer questions about impressions of the U.S. prior to coming here, really, because you probably had some vague
I
idea.
remember my impressions of taking a plane and going somewhere far away.
Yeah.
Because that was implemented on me. Really, they were like, we're gonna take a plane,
Right.
and we're gonna go somewhere far away, and you have to say goodbye. That's what I remember. I remember the day we left. I remember saying goodbye. But when you're that young, your concept of goodbye is, I'll see you in 2 hours, not
Goodbye.
right. So
Right.
that was, I knew something big was happening. I
Right.
just didn't know what it was.
Uh-huh.
And the first couple years in the United States are really blurry to me. I don't remember what it was like when I first came. I don't remember my first impressions. I don't remember the way the air smelled or the first American food that I had.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember very clearly when I started to realize that culture at home was different than culture at school.
Oh, really?
That was a
yeah.
big thing to me.
Wow.
Because I was like, this is really confusing. Why is there one language at home and one language
Mm-hmm.
at school? Why am I being forced to learn this language? Why can't I communicate what I want? Language barrier was a huge thing to me that I think really affected me as a kid
Yeah.
a lot. That was and I don't know if it affects everyone the same way. I know definitely developmentally it affects people, but to me, that was something that affected me emotionally a lot.
Well, language is more than words. It's
yeah.
a whole kind of
Way of viewing the world.
Yeah, and for example, an interesting thing. I had some friends who were from California, Southern California. They were both Mexican, and they had a child here,
Mm-hmm.
and so they really wanted to teach her to be bilingual,
Mm-hmm.
and she just had no interest in it.
Nope.
English.
And if
She
there's no
knew.
interest, it will never happen the way that you want it to.
Yeah, English was the way that people communicated in the space that she
I
knew.
worry about this actually a lot
Really?
because I want my kids to speak Spanish. But I think about it this way. I mean, the Spanish that I learned from my parents is not 100%. I didn't learn everything they taught me.
Oh, right.
I'm sure I'm bilingual, but I don't. They say words every now and then, and I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah, so
No,
is it
I'm
little
not-
kid Spanish?
It's not little kid Spanish. I mean, for sure it's not. I can definitely communicate and say what I want, and
Mm-hmm.
writing wise, I can, write a lot. But sometimes in communication, I feel lack of words.
Oh,
And
yeah.
there's times in my life where I felt it fading away from me. Now I'm at a stage where it's really, really, really coming back to me because it's extremely important to me. But
Yeah.
it's definitely not the language I feel comfortable in. It's not the language that I think in. I can make myself think in Spanish, but the language I think in is English. So, the idea of having to go back to Costa Rica, those are the things that come into my head. Not, like I'm leaving the United States. Like, how am I going to go back when this is the way that I think? That's the scariest part to me, is how my identity and my personality would be affected.
Yeah, yeah,
'Cause-
I can see that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tough to be you, apparently.
Well, and also the bilingual brain is like super interesting because, like, for example, my parents, the way they speak English is they translate in their heads. So
Right.
they're like, how would I say this in Spanish? They translate each word and then they speak to you. That's why sometimes you can, if you listen to them when English doesn't sound right, you can trace it back to translation. Or like they said it right in Spanish, it just isn't translated that way in English. I have a different way of it because I learned it out of complete necessity. I had to learn the language to be able to communicate. Same with
Right.
my brother. My youngest brother, he learned English through me and my older brother.
Yeah.
So by the time he went to school, he was already bilingual. But so he grew up with Spanish and English basically simultaneously. So they're different experiences. I mean, I struggle with how do you teach a kid Spanish when you're not an expert at it, and when if I end up marrying someone who doesn't speak Spanish too, how is that going to work out? Do you teach English first? Do you teach Spanish first? Do you teach both at the same time? It's confusing.
You take them back to their grandparents and plop them down for
Yeah.
about a year and say,
That's
Learn
yeah.
it.
I definitely think about it a lot. I mean, and I remember growing up, my parents really forced the idea of like, you need to speak Spanish at home. That's what
Yeah.
you need to speak, because they didn't want me to lose it. And they knew that if I started speaking English at home, that Spanish would not be interesting anymore.
It's hard
And
work.
so it's interesting though, because when I talk to my parents, my brain goes back to Spanish. It feels awkward to talk to my parents in English.
Oh,
It feels
interesting.
weird when they talk to me, not in like a. It's just the language that I feel comfortable in, the language that I think in with them is Spanish. With my siblings, it's English. Which a lot of people say that too. They're like, yeah, with my parents I can talk in Spanish, but with my siblings I just can't. So basically the only people in my life that I talk to in Spanish on a regular basis are my parents.
mm-hmm.
So when they're not there anymore, it's more of just something that I have and not something that I'm using all the time. And that's why I want to find a way that I can use it a lot more.
Yeah.
Like traveling.
Traveling is good.
Yeah. Or teaching it. Or
Being involved in things like the immigration forum,
right.
you could
That's
have some use for that.
Definitely helped a lot. I had to give the opening statement the other day in Spanish. I was freaking out.
Yeah? How did it
But-
go?
It went well. I liked it. It was, I had to really think about what I was writing because I didn't want it to sound like I wrote it in English and then translate it.
Oh, right,
I wanted it
right.
to sound like I wrote this in Spanish for Spanish speakers. I'm a Spanish speaker. And I think it worked out well. But I was definitely more nervous than I should have been because it wasn't in English.
Yeah, that makes it awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like trying to get people's attention in Spanish. I was like, you guys. It would have been English. I would have been like, okay, everybody stop talking.
yeah. Shut up.
Yeah.
Can I have your attention, please?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Very, very interesting. Yeah, it's just culture fascinates me. The,
Oh, for
the
sure.
ways that it affects people and the way it. What am I trying to say? It colors. I guess it adds color to everything.